Hey everyone. Oh, he's already started. Oh boy. Okay. This is what I've been dealing with for like a month. Right. So, if you hadn't guessed, we're doing a deep dive of a Goofy movie today.
A Goofy movie, yeah.
As we like to call it, Gooby.
Yeah, we've taken to calling it Gooby. I think it's safe to say this is one of our favorite Disney movies of all time.
Yeah.
Yes, a Goofy movie released in 1995, April 7th of 1995.
I was not alive.
You were not alive. So this movie earlier this month just turned 26.
Oh gosh, that's crazy.
It was directed by Kevin Lima, who has gone on to direct other Disney films such as Tarzan, 102 Dalmatians, and Enchanted.
That's an interesting range of work.
Well, I believe Goofy Movie was his directorial debut.
Oh, so he said, "I'm gonna smash it out of the park first try."
It was written by Jim Megan, Chris Matheson, who was the writer of the Bill and Ted series.
Interesting. From
the original film all the way up to this newest one.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And Brian Pimentel. The score was by Carter Burwell with additional music by Don Davis. The score is interesting because, and this is no disrespect, but it's a movie score. I never really thought anything twice about it, but apparently they brought in Don Davis, who they credited as additional music. But really he came in to rework Carter Burwell's score. Because apparently a lot of the score was experimental with a lot of choral singing and I'm like, huh.
That would have been a very different. There are a lot of things that we'll get into that would have made this a completely different movie.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I don't know how it would have sounded. Experimental
just
choral music.
Yeah, I felt like the score we got was appropriate, and there was some, nods to just cartoony, culture. There was that breakdown, the ska sounding music, that, all that stuff made sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a very choral heavy score would have been weird. Yeah. He went to see The Lion King and was just like, oh, I need more choir in this. So yeah, I just want to, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit already, but yeah, I just want to know some general reactions to this last rewatch.
I haven't seen it in a very long time. It's one of those things where I watched it. It's one of those movies that I watched a lot when I was a kid because we had it on VHS. Mm-hmm. So much so that I'm like, I can't watch it anymore.
Okay.
So I haven't seen it in a really, really long time. And there was a lot of stuff that I picked up on now as an adult watching it that as a kid I didn't really understand.
What, if you don't mind me asking?
All of the parent, there's a whole parenting subplot through it that Goofy's on one side and that big fuck. Ooh, what's his name? Pete. Yeah, Pete's on the other side, and it's kind of this parenting style battle that they're having throughout the first 2 acts of it. I didn't even realize growing up that Goofy was struggling with his parenting style as a single parent. Never considered it because I was a kid. I didn't care. I was Team Max.
Absolutely, yeah. As a kid, you can't help but be Team Max. It's all the people who were Team Ariel when they're kids, but then you grow up and you're like, shut up.
Yeah, exactly. And I even mentioned, you have it written down, but this movie is very stressful. So much of this movie is so stressful. Goofy's driving, stressful. The situations that they get themselves in, stressful. Max's attitude at most times, stressful.
I think the most stressed I got was the fucking Possum Park, Lester's Possum Park.
Yeah. And there's so much in it, especially now as an adult, where I can look back. When I watched it as a kid, I hadn't gone through this stage of my life yet because he's a teenager. I hadn't done that yet. I had no memories to look back on. Now, as an adult, I look back and I'm like, fuck, I was also very annoying at the time. I could imagine how embarrassed Max would have felt at multiple points. Like, I can draw like memories in my mind and be like, oh fuck yeah, that time sucked. I was embarrassed all the time. I didn't want anyone to ever look at me ever.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be the center of attention. So like, I connected with Max.
Yeah. Well,
I
think that's a big part of it. Is I think a lot of kids can connect with Max, and I think what they were going for is for a lot of adults to connect with Goofy, and we'll get a little more into that. But with Max, you know, he really does feel like invisible, and I think
Kylo jumped up here. What are you doing?
Hello,
buddy?
sir. Sorry, yeah, my cat Kylo just.
You might see him. He might jump up.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Oh boy. Ooh.
There he goes. All right, cool.
Just his butt was on the camera for a second.
Max feels invisible a lot of the time, and I think that's something we can all like relate to. And invisible doesn't necessarily mean like you don't have friends, because we're like as teenagers, every emotion is amped up to 15. You know, so invisible is that he thinks the girl he likes doesn't like him, or doesn't know who he is.
And like at that point, if your crush doesn't know you exist or doesn't like you, you might as well be invisible. Doesn't matter how many friends you have.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I think he is generally looked at as like kind of a nerd for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think
like he says it in the song. You know, no more Maxie the Geek, no more Goof of the Week. But anyway, so a little getting into some more of those like story beats. A little bit of history behind the movie. This movie is actually a follow-up to the series Goof Troop. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
So it's.
I mean, I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a show that centers on Goofy and Max when Max is a little boy, and Pete and PJ are there, and So this movie was a follow-up to that. I think it was originally planned as a TV special, but then it wound up becoming a full-length feature. And the idea behind this movie was to give Goofy a more emotional side, like emotional story, because up until this point, even with Goof Troop, it's like
he's just Goofy.
That's
it's
in
a
his
silly
name.
Little guy, yeah.
Yeah, it's literally in his name. So I think they wanted audiences to resonate more with him, and the film was actually greenlit by one Jeffrey Katzenberg
before the rift.
Yeah, so he was the former chairman of Walt Disney Studios. And he was actually fired by former Disney CEO Michael Eisner.
Oh, Eisner.
What a time. But yeah, so the movie was kind of seen as like a contractual obligation. It's kind of in this weird like middle ground, because it was released in the years of Disney's golden age between The Lion King and Pocahontas specifically. But it's usually left out of that like canon. And part of that is because of the box office numbers. Well, it opened at number 2 because it came out the same weekend as Bad Boys with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. So, came out.
They were set up for failure.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, there's a really crazy story I read. It was supposed to, I think, come out in 94 in the Lion King slot. But I guess when they were doing some of the pixelation of the coloring or something like that, there was one pixel that was broken in the projector. So they had to go back and redo like half the movie.
Jesus.
So
wow.
Yeah.
Also, it's insane to me that it was released when it was. Because if you think of like the quality, like animation quality of Lion King and Pocahontas, Goofy movie, for as good as it is, like story-wise and music-wise, doesn't compare quality-wise.
No.
That animation, it looks like it would be a TV special animation.
Yeah. And that's not to say that it looks bad.
No. I mean, it looks bad because it's 26 years old. I mean, it can't compete, but it doesn't look like so bad that you can't watch it, like it's unwatchable. You know what I mean? It's just not at that same like Disney caliber.
Yeah.
So I feel like, and I think you're going to talk about it more, but I feel like it wasn't just that they didn't make a lot of money in the box office. It feels like there wasn't very much invested in it to begin with.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The box office, it also wasn't released internationally, in most international markets, I should say.
Yeah.
So I think it only made like 2 million overseas. So
that's nothing.
The worldwide box office, even for the time, was less than $40 million. So like that was a Disney fail.
Yeah.
And it wasn't critically acclaimed either. So it'd be one thing if it was kind of like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which didn't make as much money but was still like critically acclaimed. Didn't have any of that either. So, it was...
Poor Goofy movie.
It wasn't really given its proper due. And it was never given the full, like, Disney treatment. There was little to no merch made for the movie. There was little to no promotion. And like I mentioned, it wasn't really released overseas very much. So, it's just... I think a lot of it was, like, in studio, it was a lot of politics involved.
Right.
Because Jeffrey Katzenberg, if you guys aren't familiar, I urge you to go watch either some stuff on YouTube or just read up on his very contentious split from Disney, especially in regards with a Bug's Life.
And that's the only reason we have Shrek.
Yeah.
I think is because of that split.
But nevertheless, the film has reached cult following status, particularly among millennials. And a lot of that had to do with what you mentioned, like the home release, especially on VHS.
Right.
It's such an interesting history behind the movie.
Yeah, I really had no idea. I knew that it was not as well marketed as the other movies. I didn't realize how much other stuff went into it. And I didn't realize it wasn't released like fully internationally. I was talking to my friend Karen about it yesterday. Hi, Karen. And I was mentioning how it was like an underrated Disney movie. And she was like, underrated? Like, I loved it when I was a kid. And all my friends loved it when I was a kid. And I have that same experience too. All of my friends know what Goofy movie is. They all watched it when they were kids because they all had them on VHS. Which makes me think that maybe they were cheaper than normal Disney movies on VHS.
Probably.
And then that's why everyone had them. But I feel like here with people who were like born around the time it came out, now that we're old enough to spend money on stuff, I'm seeing a resurgence of Goofy movie interests. Yeah. Like we found pins at Disney World, Goofy movie pins. Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
I don't know. It just seems like something that it wasn't appreciated in its time, but it took 20 years and suddenly Disney's like, wait a minute.
We'll get to that. We'll get to a little bit more of the actual like lasting legacy of this movie that continues to just only grow stronger every year, it seems. But let's talk a little bit about the cast. So Bill Farmer, of course, plays Goofy, and he's actually voiced Goofy since 1987.
Is he still voicing
He's
Goofy?
Still the voice of Goofy.
Aww,
yeah, so like when we go to like Disney and we go on Mickey and Minnie's. Yeah, that's Bill Farmer. Jason Marsden, not James Marsden.
Common mistake.
I had to specify that. Was the voice of Max. Interestingly enough, Aaron Lohr was the singing voice.
I did know that they had a separate singing voice for Max.
Which is interesting because they sound exactly the same.
Yeah, it's seamless. Was Jason Marsden, first of all, any relation to James?
I actually don't know.
Excuse me while I go off. It sounded like I was going to rant. I'm going to go off onto Google. And also, do you know anything else that he was on? Because he sounds familiar. Was he in Hocus Pocus? Was he the cat? Folks, I will Google. I'll be back.
Yeah, she will get all the burning questions about Jason Marsden answered. I will talk a little bit about Aaron Lohr, though. So Aaron Lohr, who was the singing voice of Max, he's like a big musical theater guy. What?
He was the voice of Thackeray Binks.
Oh, shit!
I'm sorry. Continue.
Anyway.
I'm really interested in Jason Marsden now.
Like I mentioned, Aaron Lohr he's a big musical theater guy. I think he does like a lot of off-Broadway, like new works. He was also in the movie version of Newsies, which is interesting. I wonder if that had anything to do with his casting in this, because Jack Feldman, one of the composers of the musical numbers in this, was one of the composers for Newsies as well. Kelly Martin as the Queen of Dick herself, Roxanne.
It's okay. Okay. The thick discourse is fine with Nani. She's an adult. This child was like 13. You creep. And a dog.
Let me recant my statement, folks.
He recants his creepy statement. But also...
But as a kid, when I was a kid...
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
So and Roxanne would be like 10 years older than me now.
I guess you could...
I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. Jim Cummings as Pete. And Jim Cummings is like in every Disney property ever. Yeah. He's the voice of Winnie the Pooh. He's the voice of Tigger. He's the voice... actually, you know what? He finished the vocals for Be Prepared in The Lion King. Jeremy Irons wasn't available to do like either re-record or do something for the end of his song. So Jim, when you hear the end of the song, that's actually Jim Cummings.
That's crazy.
Doing Jeremy Irons as Scar. Yeah, he's like layered. A Disney legend.
That's layered.
So Kendra has a really good ear.
Oh yes, it's not that good because they sound the same.
That's true.
Exactly.
So Rob Paulson voiced PJ, Pete's son, and he's also the voice of Carl Weezer in Jimmy Neutron.
Jimmy's mom.
Jimmy's mom.
They sound so similar.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Wallace Shawn is Principal Mazer. He was fresh off of doing Toy Story, so that makes sense he's there. Frank Welker was the voice of Bigfoot, which is interesting. I didn't know that. He's also the original Scooby-Doo.
Wow. What a credit to just like slide in there.
Yeah. Jonah Von Oy as Stacy. Pauly Shore.
I've heard that name
was
before.
Bobby. He's like a big 90s kind of comedian actor guy. And he asked to be uncredited in this. I don't know why. Kevin Lima revealed that he did ask to be uncredited.
Maybe he thought it was going to flop.
Maybe, or maybe he just didn't want to I don't know, some of those stars in the 90s didn't...
I don't want to pull focus.
Yeah, kind of. Which, Robin Williams saying that makes sense. Pauly Shore.
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to be mean, but...
I think Bobby's hilarious in this movie. And it's cool because most of his dialogue was improvised that they went back and animated in later.
Oh wow, okay.
So
Bobby's the himbo.
Kevin Lima, he did this really great for the 25th anniversary last year. Kevin Lima tweeted out a bunch of fun facts, and that was one of them. Is just that he asked to be uncredited and he improv a lot of what he had.
It's so crazy to me thinking about a movie that came out 26 years ago and the director goes on Twitter to be like, oh, by the way, this movie I made 26 years ago, back when Twitter wasn't even a thought in anyone's mind.
And it's cool because there's pictures he has of the cassettes of the demos for some of the musical numbers. That
was something that we were talking about as we were watching it. So much of it is kids. There are some children today and some adults probably today who don't know what cassettes are, would have been confused seeing that.
Right, when that scene where
all the stuff's coming out of the cassette tape, they'd be like, what the hell is that? Maps, physical paper maps, no clue. They would have no clue.
Yeah.
And not as a diss, it's just that's how far technology has come in such a short time. And also the fact that they weren't wearing seatbelts a lot of the time, that wouldn't fly today.
That wouldn't fly. Wear your seatbelts, kids.
Wear your seatbelts, kids.
And adults, everyone wear your
seatbelts.
Even if you're parked, wear a seatbelt. And of course, Tevin Campbell, big R&B star in the 90s, was the voice of Powerline.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I didn't write it down, but before I forget, he actually performed a lot of those, his numbers in front of a green screen.
Yeah, the choreography.
Yeah, the choreography in front of a green screen, which is really cool because then, this was really before mocap was a thing. So that means the animators would have had to reference that footage.
Right.
To animate him
old
dancing.
School Disney.
Yeah. And it's such an art form that you don't really hear about too much anymore. Because and not that you would because we have mocap. So it's but
you could tell that this one, especially compared to if we're going to go directly around it, Lion King and Pocahontas, even Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. When did that come out? 92?
Yeah. Now that movie had the benefit of having money. Because they actually used some CG in that.
I was going to say, they're all computer generated. Yeah. You can tell that this one wasn't as reliant on computer or that kind of technology to animate it. But yeah, Tevin Campbell as Powerline, 100% scene stealer.
Yeah.
The two songs you remember from the movie are his songs.
Exactly.
And they're not even good those are good for Disney movie songs. Those are good for an animated movie songs. Those are good for musical songs. Yeah. Those are just good songs.
Those are just certified.
On their own. Oh, they're so good.
Bangers.
Sure.
Speaking of, I'm just going to get into the story and the music a little bit. I want to shine a little light. I want to show a little love to Gooby himself, to Goofy.
This one's for you, Gooby.
Single dad of the year.
Yeah.
He was trying his very best the whole movie.
Yeah. Something I didn't appreciate as a kid was just he was really just trying to be a good dad and connect with his son who was being an asshole most of the time.
Yeah. And you pointed it out before, there's this difference of parenting, and I think you see that a lot in real life.
Yeah.
I love the exchange where Goofy says, "My son loves me," and Pete says, "My son respects me."
Exactly.
And it's like, damn.
Yeah,
like,
and even the line before that, Goofy says, like, "My son may not be what you think a son should be, but he loves me."
Yeah.
And yeah, just that whole back and forth, you can't appreciate it as a kid. I can barely appreciate it as someone with no kids. Like, I don't know the struggle of, like, how are we going to parent a child? Are you supposed to be firm? Are you supposed to be lax? Like, it's hard to find that in between. Yeah, and you also wrote about how it's a father and son story. And I was thinking about it, and I feel like a lot of Disney stories are father-daughter. It's rare to get a father-son. Yeah. Especially back then. Like, if you think of, like, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Pocahontas, those are all father-daughter. You have, like, Lion King, that's father and son, but, like, I feel like it's kind of an outlier.
Yeah.
Especially father or single father.
I was going to say single father is almost never done, just in general.
It's usually always single mothers.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a whole other conversation on, like, societal norms and expectations and things like that. But for those who don't know me, father-son stories, I mean, well, any real, like, single parental story always just strikes a chord. I was raised by a single parent, so, like, that always hits me extra hard. And even though this movie is a little gooby, there's still some moments in it where it's just, like,
super heartfelt.
I personally think that they if they were setting out to give Goofy an emotional arc, I think they succeeded.
Yeah. Without making it, like, out of character.
Exactly, because he still has his, like, he's still goofy by the end of the movie. Yeah. Like, I genuinely love the story that they tell in this. Now, something we were talking a little bit about last night is something I definitely didn't think about until rewatching it. So most of the musical numbers were written by Tom Snow and Jack Feldman. Tom Snow has written for artists like Michael Jackson, Dolly Parton, Olivia Newton-John, Selena, and many, many more. Jack Feldman, like I mentioned, is known for his Disney flop turned cult classic, Newsies. Now, interestingly enough, Jack Feldman and Alan Menken, who worked on Newsies as the composers, they won a Razzie, which is the opposite of an Oscar. It's like, so they won a Razzie for the worst original song with High Times, Hard Times in 1992. But they got their redemption because they then won the Tony Award for Best Score with the stage adaptation of Newsies.
Yeah. That's like one of the best redemption stories. Like, that's such an achievement.
Listen, y'all, I know we're talking about Goofy movie right now. If y'all get the chance, I'm not going to tell y'all have to watch the original Newsies. But if you guys don't go on Disney Plus and watch Newsies live,
watch the staged Newsies.
Y'all,
that one's
so good.
It's fantastic. The movie Newsies, skip it. You'll never see us doing a deep dive on that because I refuse to watch it.
I personally love the original Newsies, acknowledging that it's not very good. But the thing is, without that movie and the cult status of that movie, we wouldn't have. Yeah. Newsies, anyway, let's not dive into that.
It's not about Newsies,
because this whole thing will become about Newsies. And the Powerline numbers were written by Patrick DeReamer, I think that's how you say his name, and Roy Freeland. Now, this movie gets a lot of shine for the Powerline stuff. Reasonably so. It's the best music in the movie.
Yes.
But it actually, this is what we were talking about last night. It actually really works well as a musical. So I'm going to break down a couple of the songs here. There's not a whole lot of them, but so After Today is a really effective opening number. There were 3 different numbers that were written for the opening because the director was, and I quote, pretty demanding that the opening not only melodically pop, but the lyrics deliver a lot of plot information. And it does exactly that. After reading that quote, I'm like, yeah, we learn who Max is, and we learn what he wants to do. We learn why Roxanne's important. We even learn that Principal Mazer is insane when he says you'll be suspended. Like,
yeah, we learn a lot of, like, the school atmosphere that Max is in, and Max as a person and how he fits into that.
Yeah. And I also love the not so subtle reference to Grease, with him hopping on the bleachers and whatnot. Stand Out. It kind of serves as Max's I Want song, which every musical has that I Want song. And he wants to make an impression and be the only one Roxanne sees. Because, like we mentioned before, he feels invisible. And I also love the imagery of Powerline singing the lyrics, living all their lives waiting in the wings, while Max is literally in the wings of his high school theater. And then he bursts out for the lyrics stand out above the crowd. And I just think that's brilliant. And also, let's talk real quick. Why is Max such a talented dancer?
You know, with that Powerline cutout in his room, he is in his room with his little TV just doing the dances over and over again.
Oh, and because it was the 90s and like tapes and cassettes and VHSs were selling all the time, you know he bought every volume of the Powerline choreography on VHS.
Yeah. He had a Walkman and he would just put the headphones on and he would clip it to his pants, his very saggy jeans, and he would just dance. And then that's why Goofy started to have to knock, because Max didn't want him walking in learning choreography. That's that. But also I wanted to say, for Stand Out, you mentioned it was like his I Want song, and the line I think that specifically talks about what Max wants is when Powerline says like, stand out till you notice me.
Yeah.
Like that's like perfectly.
Absolutely.
Anyway, sorry.
No, yeah. It's just, when you think of shit like that, and it's especially with the Powerline songs, because those are fully something you would hear on the radio. And like, you can listen to it out of context and it still works.
Right. I was going to say you would hear it on the radio, especially in 1995. It's very much like we were talking about how Powerline's kind of a mix of like Michael Jackson and Prince. So yeah, it's very period appropriate. Yes, thank you, John.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was reading and we were right. His design was inspired by Michael Jackson, Prince, and Bobby Brown. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The next song is On the Open Road. I love the song. It's so much fun, and we really get a good glimpse into Goofy and Max's personalities and just their demeanors toward each other right now.
Yeah, coming off of like Stand Out and then hearing On the Open Road, very different like types of music. So it's like kind of showcasing how different Max and Goofy are. Yeah,
and I love that that we have like an ensemble in this particular number, just all these different characters going on their own road trips. But some of them going to prison.
Yes, some of them being dead.
Yeah.
But the best part about this number and the people in it is that they pop up in different parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Like I noticed that at some point they pass a bunch of nuns.
The nuns are all over the movie.
Yeah, and the nuns were in the diner later on. So like this, we're getting... perhaps it's just because they didn't want to create new animations for all of these characters, but we're meeting the same people. We're like, oh, I remember them from the road, and now here they are because they're going cross country. I don't know, very cool.
Well, it just reminds me of like driving to and from like college, like between breaks, and sometimes you'd be following the same car for like for me, because I live 7 hours away. I sometimes like it'd be like 4 hours.
Yeah, you make a little road friend.
Yeah.
There were some times, because the school I went to was a pretty big school. Sometimes I was leaving like after spring break, coming back up after winter break or something, and I'm following one car all the way down, and I see their license plate, and I'm like, oh, we're going to the same place. Like, we're both going back to school. We both lived in the same city, and we're both going back to the same city.
And you even hear some of those stories like online, on the internet, when people are like, oh yeah, we pulled over and had lunch because we're driving such a long distance.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of adds like another level of realism to it. Although I think you're right. I think it's probably because they didn't have the budget to
they didn't want to make
design more characters.
Whatever, it worked for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's this last note, John, right here? What does that say?
I said, fuck, Goofy can't drive.
Goofy can't fucking drive. Again, going back to the stressful thing. He's not even looking at the road. No. He's got the map fully over. It's so stressful.
At one point, he had his map,
fucking feet up on the...
Like, how is he accelerating? How is he pressing the gas?
How's the gas going? God damn. Anyway.
Yeah, and then right after that song, he starts veering into the other lane.
And Max is just like...
What are you doing?
You're gonna get us killed.
The next song is Lester's Possum Park. Look, I don't want to talk about the song. This song, it was written by Randy Peterson and Kevin Quinn, and that is all they get because I don't like the song very much.
Creepy song, creepy animatronics, creepy place. I hate it.
Now there is something to be said about like, you know, the musical intricacies of like bluegrass music. It is just not for me.
It's not even that it's just like I didn't like the song. It was just that I was very stressed in that scene and I don't want to listen to it.
That little kid just singing in Max's face and he makes the most disgusted face at her.
She's nasty.
Nobody else but you. Fuck me up.
Yeah.
That's one of the songs that gets to me every time I watch it.
Yeah.
It's a very, very pretty song. I love the harmonies in it. And you don't see these kind of duets too often.
Yeah.
Either between men or especially father and son. I'm sure there's more. But the only one I can think of off the top of my head, Into the Woods, the baker and the old man. But that's, like I said, I'm sure there's others, but that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. And it's like the perfect song to come after that like intense scene they had, where, you know, Goofy is like where Max says, I have my own life, and Goofy's like, I know, I just want to be part of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's an argument that most people have with their parents, especially going into adulthood.
It's just a matter of kids understanding. Yeah, kids understanding that like parents don't want to take over your life. They just want to be part of it.
Yeah.
They've been part of it this whole time, and now that you're like old enough to do stuff on your own, they're not part of it anymore as much. It's sad. But also...
And how often does a parent say, like, no matter how old you get, you're always going to be my little...
All the time. My dad tells me that every time I see him.
Yeah. So, yeah, I love the song.
I was going to say, and this probably also is why I noticed and thought about the father-son dynamic. This was probably, thinking back in the 90s especially, father and son relationships, you never saw in, especially like movies and stuff, where a father tells his son like, oh, I love you, and the son telling this father like, oh, I love you too. Like for some reason, masculinity and how fragile it is, and sexism and all that stuff was like frowned upon to show your father love as a son.
Yeah. Well, I think of the Hi Dad Soup.
Yeah.
When he says, I love you, and they get real awkward about it.
Yeah, you don't like, especially at the time, like that wasn't explored. Like the softness and emotion between father and son just like wasn't a thing that people talked about. It was okay to have like an emotional relationship with your mom because she's a woman, but it's not okay for your dad. Your dad has to be hard and strict and manly, and men don't share their feelings and opinions and stuff like that. So I think that song in particular, the whole movie though, is kind of like a response to that very, very toxic aspect of our society, which I feel like is less prevalent today in like more recent movies and stuff like that. I feel like it's more explored, and it's okay for men to be vulnerable. Yeah, back then it probably wasn't.
No, I mean...
And that's probably why we didn't have a lot of father-son, like happy father-son relationships. One of the only other ones I could think of was Lion King, and his dad died. Yeah,
and even then, like they toyed with that same concept when, after Mufasa saves Simba from the hyenas, and he goes, I was afraid today. He goes, I'm only strong when I have to be. Like, I still get scared. Yeah. Like, I was scared I was going to lose you. And it's like, we as a society see, well, we're poised to see, like, men in, like, this uber macho, like, light. So, yeah, I agree. Just seeing, like, Goofy is he's an unconventional kind of guy anyway.
Yeah. But he's just, like, he's never, like, Pete is an asshole. Yeah. And he's rude to his kid, and he doesn't want to show him any affection.
Definitely voted for Trump.
Oh, 100%. But Goofy, like, he always, like, showed Max that he cared about him, and always told him that he cared about him and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like that was kind of rare back then.
And sometimes it's embarrassing, like when he gives him his lunch and kisses him on the cheek.
Oh, yeah, that's embarrassing.
No matter who you are.
No matter who you are, no matter what decade it is, it's going to be embarrassing. But yeah, it gives me like Finding Nemo vibes. More recently, like in Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
When his dad made him say, I love you back in the car.
Copy.
Like, I want to see more of that. And
Yeah.
I think we're at a time now where we can be. But in 1995, I don't know if that was as common.
I think you're right. And then you hear it like in the lyrics, because they're literally talking about like, your sense of humor is weird and your music is bananas and sounds like monkeys in the zoo.
Yeah.
They eventually are, they just like, you're the one constant.
Yeah.
Oh. I know. I gotta stop talking about the song before I start crying here. But yeah, so love that song, and it leads perfectly into, without a doubt, the best song in the movie, maybe of all time. Of course, I'm talking
bold
about
words.
Eye to Eye.
I didn't realize it was spelled that way. It's spelled literally like capital I, number 2, capital I.
I think that's all. Like, it's a very 90s thing too.
100%. But damn.
What a good fucking song.
Yeah. And perfectly sums up our journey.
Yeah.
Where we're at with Gooby and Mini Gooby.
Yeah, that's another example. It was written as like a pop style, like radio, like hit. But yeah, it perfectly encapsulates the entire story our two main characters have taken up until this point. Because the song is literally about their relationship and how they were on different wavelengths at the beginning of the movie. But after they hear one another and they acknowledge their feelings about one another, they're on the same page.
Yeah.
They're quite literally seeing eye to eye. It's one of those songs that, like, even this is where the nostalgia gets to me. Like, the other is like some deep rooted issues I've got. Not issues, but just feelings I've got. But Eye to Eye is definitely the song that, like, I closely associate with, like, oh, my brother and I used to watch this all the time as kids, and it was such a different time. So this is the one where, like, I'll be watching it, and at first I'm like singing and dancing along, but then all of a sudden I'm like, I gotta stop. It's like, I don't know why, because it's not a sad song in the slightest. But I think it's just the memories I associate with it.
Eye to Eye and Stand Out. It's like those songs. Those lists of like songs that make white people like real hype. Like these two are like songs to make millennials really hype.
Yeah.
It'd be on that Spotify playlist, if
Absolutely.
you will. You hear the first like
the chords that
and you're like, I'm sorry, I have to go.
I gotta fuck up the dance floor.
Excuse me, I have to get up.
That number also has one of my favorite gags in the movie. It's when Goofy goes into the dressing room.
God, the fucking face Goofy pulls is just like he looks like shocked. He's like twirling his hair and he's like this. And he's like, why he look like that?
Also, wait, I forgot to mention, earlier in the movie, it just made me think of this. So in Eye to Eye, Max fully kills someone.
Oh yeah, they've been killing people left and right.
He slams that guy into the giant screen. And then earlier in the movie, Goofy kills a mime. Yeah,
they're murderers.
So moving on from the music just a little bit, we're getting close to the end here. Let's talk a little bit about the legacy this movie leaves behind. We've mentioned it kind of throughout this, and it's kind of this cult favorite now. You mentioned, and I have the same experience. Nearly everyone we know in our age range loves this fucking movie. But it really wasn't until just a couple years ago, or just a few years ago, I should say, that Disney finally realized how much people respond to this movie. So if you follow Perez Periódico, see the little tag down there, we did a post about the 2015 D23 Expo. A Goofy movie had their own panel to celebrate the 20th anniversary, but Disney didn't think they'd get much of a turnout.
Insane.
So they just didn't plan for it. Well, not only did a Goofy movie get the largest turnout of the expo.
Oh, wow.
Nearing almost 1,000 people. They actually had to turn people away because they ran out of space.
Wow.
So that's just insane to me. I mean, you had Bill Farmer and you had Jason Mars and some of the cast and writers and things like that, which is really cool. But the coolest thing is Powerline himself, Tevin Campbell, showed up and performed Eye to Eye. And I put a little snippet of that on the Instagram page. He sounds
The same.
Yeah. I was reading up on him. He has like a 4-octave range. I'm like, what the fuck,
Okay.
dude? That's not fair. And it was really cool because they like brought out dancers that were doing the choreography from the movie. And I remember the first time I watched it, that was another moment. I just couldn't help. I started crying. Because I was like, damn, I didn't realize how much this movie like meant to
other people. Right. It was like you realize how much it means to you. You realize how much you loved it as a kid and still today. But you don't realize, like, damn, like, everyone really loves this movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So I got my video clip from the Disney Examiner YouTube page. So they have the whole number on there. So I strongly urge y'all to go watch that. And it really influenced the reboot of DuckTales. Because the creators wanted to do for Donald what Goofy Movie did for Goofy. Kind of give him more of like a emotional, like parental.
Yeah, when I think of Donald Duck, I just think of like a very upset duck.
Yeah,
he's just pissed.
I think of all of the McElroy's horrid impressions of Donald Duck.
Oh God, I had forgotten about that.
Make the sound of Donald with your mouth. I can't. I got nothing. I'm gonna leave you boys without listening. Say it.
They're so talented, so many other ways, just not there.
Just not as Donald. And there's a lot of references to a Goofy Movie sprinkled throughout the series. I didn't know this, but there's also a clip of some of the characters singing stand out in the show. Mm-hmm. I just posted that on my Instagram today, too. It's insane to me to think how little the studio seemed to have, like how little faith they had in this movie. And
they had no idea what they had.
The cultural phenomenon that it is now.
Yeah.
Just some like general like final thoughts on the movie. It's a movie I can go back to and just enjoy the hell out of every time.
I think it is definitely something special, definitely underrated for as much as people like it and how much our age group actually watched it. I still think, especially internationally, super, super underrated. I would love some sort of like presence at the parks. I know that they do have, now cavalcades, but sometimes they are characters in the parades. They'll have Max and Goofy together.
Oh, cool.
Which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's just, I think it was an important movie to come out when it did. I wish it had gotten more support from the studio, but at least we got it in the end, and at least a lot of little boys and their dads got to watch it and see like an actually well depicted emotional connection between a father and son that wasn't like frowned upon.
Could you imagine if at the Disney parks they had a like Powerline 90s party, or
they need to, it would be like a throwback stage show with like characters and dancers. They do that all the time anyway. It's just gonna be, you know what, it's just gonna be a bunch of like 20 to 30 year olds just like acting up,
just acting a goddamn fool. I wouldn't be surprised if they went all out for the 30th anniversary. Which is in 4 years.
I think at least after the 20th, at least they'll book a big enough room at the expo. But yeah, I can see them doing something big.
I absolutely love this movie. It's a 10 out of 10 in my book.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I love it.
But it's very, very good and underappreciated. You look purple as hell. Nope, that's worse. That's better, but it's dark. How long have you been purple? Oh no, that's too bright. Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry, y'all. I didn't know he was purple.
She
fucking Thanos over here. Talking about Goofy Movie with Thanos.
But yeah, so I think that's gonna do it for this edition of Deep Dive. Thank you all, and we will see you guys next time.
Yes. Bye everyone.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And also, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch. All right, see you next time.